Today's video, let's finish out these drawers and install them into this cabinet and then put these drawer fronts on so that we have some nice usable drawers for our cabinet. The next step after making the drawer fronts, which you saw in the last video, is putting the drawers in. And I'm going to show you about the easiest way that I know to install full slide drawer slides into the cabinet. And these drawers, of course, are recessed because I'm going to have that drawer front that we made earlier, put them on the front here. But right now, I want to show you how I installed these into this cabinet. And I actually have two of these cabinets. They're exactly the same size, fortunately for me. So that made life a little easier building them. And let's see how we go about putting these in what I consider a relatively easy way. Okay, so to start out, I need to mount all of the drawer slides onto the drawers. So for the larger drawers, I created this jig that was made out of 1/2-inch plywood, and it has an 1/8-inch little runner across the bottom that extends out, so that I can push it up against the bottom of the drawer, and it puts the slide at exactly halfway onto the drawer side. This makes it real easy to mount all of the slides in the exact same spot. Now, because these are center line and there's 3 sections to it, I have to keep the drawer slide completely together until I get 2 screws firmly attached to the center section of the slide. Then I can remove the outer section of the slide and put the last screw or 2 in place. This keeps that center section aligned perfectly with the entire unit, so that when I mount the other piece into the cabinet, everything lines up perfectly. So I used the same jig that I used to mount the slides onto the drawers to mount the drawer slide inside the cabinet. At the front, I align the jig to the front of the cabinet by using the spacer, which happens to be a 3/4 inch pen blank, and this gives the perfect space for my false front to fit inside the drawer. When I put the drawer slide on top of the jig, I just need to align it to the front of the jig. So if the drawer slide front and the jig front are lined up and the spacer was used, that's going to give me the perfect inset for my false front to go in. Now I want to mark at least 1 or 2 of the holes onto the cabinet here, and I'm going to just use an awl for that. Afterwards, I take the drawer slides off and I pull these tabs out a little bit, and these tabs allow some flexibility, so when you first put the drawer in, it's going to push the drawer slides back and forth and align them up and give it a nice fit between the drawer slides and the cabinet. Afterwards, you can go back in and put a couple solid screws into the solid holes that don't have the tabs on them. Again, using the awl to mark the location in the center of all of my screw holes. It's important to put the screws in at the center. That way you don't bring the drawer slide off the jig any. With all the drawer slides mounted, it's just a matter of putting these very big drawers in place, which is somewhat of a difficult task to do. Once they're aligned and pushed in, they self-align, and it takes a little bit of pushing the first time in, but once they get set in, they work quite well. Now I can take and measure the 2 smaller drawers at the top and see how much room I need to put the drawer slide exactly in the middle. I take those measurements on over to the table, and it was 3 3/4 inches that I need, which is 1 3/8 inches that need to come off of this piece to make my larger jig for the base drawers, my smaller jig for the upper drawers. Now I go about screwing the upper drawer slides in the same exact way that I did the base drawers. And of course, the procedure for mounting the drawer slides into the cabinets for the upper drawers is exactly the same as on the lower drawers. In this case, I just use my newly reduced jig for the upper drawer slides. Okay, so to finish out the installation of these drawers, we need to add this false front onto our drawers. And again, I'm going to show you about the easiest way that I know how to do it. And that, of course, it uses playing cards to space everything out evenly around the drawer before I install it into it. So let's see how we do that. To begin the alignment process, I place the cabinet on its back and make sure that all the drawer numbers match up with the drawer front numbers, because I did align them up when I trimmed them down to size. Using a normal deck of playing cards, I distribute even number of cards on all the sides. Now, for each side, left and right, I would use the same amount for those, and then for the tops, I'd use the same amount for the top and bottom. They don't necessarily all four would be exactly the same, because sometimes you have a little bit of a difference between the height and the width. Once I have the right number of cards into each side, both top and bottom and both sides, I want to make sure that the cards are snug, that they fit in there rather snugly. That way it makes sure it evens it out exactly the same. Now in longer drawers, you may want to use 4 sets of cards for the top and bottom instead of like what I'm doing here, just in the center. That way you even out the drawer all the way around, so you'd end up with 6 stacks of cards, 1 on each side, 1 on the top and bottom. Next step, just drill out the holes that are already there, using them as a guide from the drawer fronts to drill out the holes into the drawer itself. This whole process is again repeated for the rest of the drawers on the cabinet. I had to purchase some longer screws for the drawer handles. Now the ones that I have that came with it are much too short, and the only ones that I could purchase were much longer, so they needed to be cut down. To do this, I use a pair of pliers that are used for electricians, because the screw is the exact same size as the screws that go on to hold all of the wall sockets and light switches in. And the reason I use this tool is because you can screw in the screw, make the cut, then you back the screw out of the threaded part, and it rethreads the front part of it, and that way it makes it much easier to use afterwards. If you just cut it with a hacksaw or anything else, you have a real rough edge, and then you have to work it to make it so that it's usable for the drawer handles. Now with the correct size screws, I can go ahead and insert them into the 2 holes that I previously drilled using the drawer front as a guide, and then place the drawer front on there. Add the drawer handle and then tighten everything down. This will keep my drawer front in place so that I can line it up with the opening. Fortunately, the holes in both the drawer front and the drawer itself have enough wiggle room to allow you to move the drawer front and align it perfect into the opening. Now this process is going to definitely require a few trial fits. You're going to have to put the drawer on, tighten it up, try it in there, then pull it out and reset it up. The other way that you can do that is start by the top and just remove each drawer and work your way around. That way you have access to the back of the drawer while the drawer is inside. And you're going to see how this is done. The top drawer is a perfect example to make alignment for all the drawers much easier. Again, like I said, you can work from the top down. I worked from the bottom up this time, but obviously the next cabinet I'm going to work from the top down, because what I will do is put the handle on the drawer, tighten it up, close the drawer. Once the drawer is inside the cabinet, I'm going to use my cards to adjust the false front so that it fits in there again, just like I did while it was laying down, so that it fits in there with space all the way around. Tighten up the drawer handle, and then from there I can secure the drawer front to the drawer. For all the drawers, I'm going to use a clamp, and this is just a quick clamp, one of the quick bar clamps, and I use a card on the front just to prevent any marring on the front surface. But I'm going to clamp that down tight, and then using screws that you normally use for pocket hole assembly, because these are perfect for this type of procedure because they have a nice flat head. In addition, I added a washer to it to make it so that it doesn't go all the way through, using a 1-inch screw, just to give me that little extra security that nothing's going to pop through the front. I'm going to add 2 screws on each side, both lower and upper. Now on the upper drawer, I only use 1 screw on each side, but on the lower drawers for the much higher drawer fronts, I'm going to use 4 screws in all 4 corners. And that's going to keep my drawer front on there perfectly. And if I ever do need to change the drawer front later on down the road, if it becomes warped, if it gets damaged or needs to be refinished or whatever, it's just a matter of removing all the screws and taking that drawer front off. All right, so that's about the easiest way that I know to install drawers into a cabinet and to add the false fronts. Now, if you had overlay fronts onto that, you would just put the drawers parallel to the edge here and then mount these onto the front using spacers to space them out evenly, or however you want to place them. If you have them overlapping or butting up to each other, you use the cards in between as they connect to each other on the outside. But in my case, I wanted everything flush. I wanted these to go inside the cabinet so that they were flush. I think it gives it a nicer finish. It takes a lot more time and a lot more work, but the end result of the cabinets is pretty nice looking. So please do like and subscribe. You know, if you found this information useful, do give it a like or a thumbs up, because that does help out the channel. And subscribe to see the rest. I'm actually going to be starting on, I believe the next thing is my pantry, and then a full-length spice cabinet pan cupboard that goes next to our refrigerator. And then I have one more upper left, and I'll be done making the cabinets. Then we go about installing the whole thing. Ooh, a lot of fun. Stay tuned.